Hey everyone, welcome back. In the weeks after the 2022 midterms, it's been really interesting to watch the various reactions that have come out of the Republican Party, as they have really started to highlight the deep divide between the more conservative Reaganite style Republican and the MAGA wing of the party. Therefore, to cover the two vastly different reactions that these groups have had, we're going to break this video down into two parts. This will be part one, where we will discuss what the more conventional Reaganite conservative has come up with as to why they lost in 2022. And then in part two, we'll discuss what MAGA World has taken from the midterms and what they think the path forward is to securing power in the future. To sum up what more conventional conservatives are taking away from the 2022 midterms, we can turn to the current Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell.
We underperformed among independents and moderates because their impression of many of the people in our party in leadership roles is that they're involved in chaos, negativity, excessive attacks, and it frightened independent and moderate Republican voters.
Now, I may disagree with Mitch McConnell on a lot of policy matters, but there is no denying that that man is an incredibly astute politician, and here his analysis is entirely correct. However, that should be no surprise to anyone, as Republicans knew this back in 2014. After their losses in the 2012 presidential election, Republicans commissioned a massive study in order to figure out what they could do better to help win the majority in the next presidential election and give themselves unified control of the government. This report mostly focused on expanding the Republican base, drawing in more minorities, members of the LGBTQ community, etc. But that all went right out the window with the arrival of the GOP's biggest problem at the moment, one Donald John Trump. Now, none of Donald Trump's ideas were particularly new to the Republican Party. In fact, many of them trace back to 2010 with the Tea Party movement and what eventually became the Freedom Caucus. However, he brought so many of these extreme right-wing viewpoints from the fringe and made them the center point of the Republican Party. And a lot of these more establishment Republicans were very uncomfortable with that at the time. They were like, no, we did all the research, this is not what we want to do, we need to stop Trump from being nominated. They failed, and in turn they said, well, what do we have to lose? And they embraced him. And the problem with embracing Donald Trump is that there is one thing that he is very, very good at. It is not politics, and it is certainly not business, but it's branding. Donald Trump is a wizard at creating a sticking brand identity. Think about it. He was able to brand himself as a successful billionaire businessman despite being, ostensibly, none of those things. But everyone bought it to the point where 2 whole TV shows were spawned off the concept. And, even now, there's still that, very passive but persistent thought that Trump equals success, even though, again, we know that's not true. But then he came in and did that for the Republican Party, and the brand they got wasn't the compassionate conservatism of George Bush or the more stoic Americana feel of Ronald Reagan. It was the Tea Party. This brand of incredibly extreme politicians who wanted to tear things down, be obstructive, cause chaos, and generally turn things on their head. And Donald Trump was very good at that. I mean, he wasn't very good at passing legislation, given that they failed to overturn Obamacare. They really failed to pass any meaningful legislation on infrastructure, even though every other week was infrastructure week. And, his administration was just a string of chaotic scandals. And Donald Trump's ability to brand things left that brand on the Republican Party, as Mitch McConnell and other more conventional conservatives have observed. And that's what's costing them right now. People look, they think at Republicans and they go, Donald Trump and his type of Republican, that's what Republicans are. And that is a hard barrier to overcome, and it's probably one of the leading reasons as to why they lost overall in the 2022 midterms. But now the question comes, what can they do about it? The short answer for establishment Republicans is that it is time to make a pivot away from the more cultural issues that have been the mainstay of Republican rhetoric for the last 10 years, and towards a much narrower focus on areas that they are perceived to be more capable in, such as the economy and crime. In fact, we can see evidence of this in the fact that a law that would protect gay and interracial marriage was passed over the Senate filibuster with some bipartisan support from more moderate Republican senators. These people see that those cultural issues aren't helping them, and this is especially obvious in how big a factor the overturning of Roe v. Wade was in the midterms, which up until this point had been a core aspect of the Republican rhetoric and their policy platform overall. However, there are going to be two major problems with making that shift. The first problem, of course, is that this is what they've been feeding their base for years. Their base is ready to own the libs, to do everything that they can to take power away from those that they perceive as threats in order to bolster their own power. You see people in the conservative movement who are really comfortable coming out and saying, we are Christian nationalists and we want, essentially, religious Christian law to govern the country. So when you've been feeding your base this, and that's the people you're starting to get as candidates, turning and making this very hard pivot away from those issues is going to be tricky. The second problem for more establishment Republicans is that they don't have a contender for the Republican leadership. Right now, as we're looking forward to 2024, there are only two real contenders in the Republican Party. That is former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, on the surface, these two candidates are very different. Donald Trump is the former disgraced president. He lost his election, has a long train of scandals, and might be facing possible indictment. On the other hand, Ron DeSantis is the successful governor of Florida, just won his re-election by a very wide margin, which is obviously important, especially in a state like Florida, which has a significant number of electoral votes. However, once you look past the surface, these two men are proposing essentially the same ideas, and both of them are certainly a member of the MAGA movement. In fact, Ron DeSantis has tried to be so much like Donald Trump that he has even taken to copying his hand gestures when he speaks. I'll leave a link to a video in the description where you can see a nice little compilation of Ron DeSantis mimicking Donald Trump, and it's fairly amusing. But the big takeaway here is that both of these men are from the most extreme wing of the Republican Party and definitely do not want to make the pivot that more conventional conservatives see the party needing to make in order to remain competitive. So, without a candidate of their own, they really don't have a way to take the reins of the party back and steer it in a more successful direction. This is really going to put them at a disadvantage as they try and fend off the MAGA wing of the party, which has its own very interesting set of ideas as to what happened in the midterms and how to proceed. But we'll cover that in part 2. Until then, think about it. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever I post new videos. If you want to support me on my other social media platforms, all the links you need will be in the video description below. If you have any questions about this video or another topic that you'd like me to discuss, leave me a comment and I'll do my best to get you an answer. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.